Do you think sodium in because every time you look at ingredients, right, the sodium is just off the scale sometimes. You know, I'm talking to some guys from Europe, and they telling me like in Europe, like in England and France, it's a much lower sodium. The food contains much less sodium, you know, percentage wise in their food, and it seems like in you go get a pack of turkey, let's say, right? You look in the bag, the sodium is like 600, something like that milligrams or whatever, right? Why so much sodium in food? You think, and do you think that's bad, or do you, like because I think the FDA recommends eating what, like 2,000 milligrams of sodium a day?
1,500.
1,500, there you go.
Yeah.
And it seems like some products have, like, you eat like just a couple of servings and it's already, you had that percentage, you know what I'm saying?
Okay. The sodium is in there for two reasons. First of all, what you're talking about mostly is processed foods. In other words, natural food does not contain that much sodium, but processed food does. The reason is it's in there for twofold. First, as a partial preservative, it helps to preserve, let's say, delicatessen meats or something like that, like the turkey you mentioned. Secondarily, I know it sounds funny, it's added there for taste. It's added to make these meats, or usually are already pre-cooked or something like that. And other foods, it's not so much active. Let's say cereals, whatever, that where you see a lot of sodium. It's added basically for a taste thing more than anything else. I know you're probably thinking, why do they need that much sodium? No, I know it doesn't make any sense from a purely scientific point of view. It doesn't make any sense to add more that much sodium. But again, even in the sodium has what they call a hydroscopic effect. It actually tends to attract water. And I know this sounds funny. Even if they put it in a dry cereal, it'll actually puff up the cereal and make it look fresher. So that's another reason why they put a ton of sodium in. And from a health standpoint, it's not good to have that much sodium.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, do you recommend people follow the FDA recommendation on the sodium intake daily, the 1,500 milligrams?
The only people I would recommend that for are what they call people with sodium sensitive hypertension. For some reason, this a lot of black people have this. It has to do with something called the renin-angiotensin system. It's a genetic thing where they're born with a greater tendency to get, let's say, elevated blood pressure when they consume high sodium food. They have to be real careful because eventually that hypertension can either give them a stroke or destroy their kidneys completely. Most people, their kidneys are gradually destroyed as they age because of subtle hypertension. In other words, if you go through life with elevated hypertension, your kidneys are slowly being destroyed. That's why I believe the figure is 50% of people over 60 only have 40% of their kidney function left. This is a gradual destruction of the filtering units. But for other people, and I did this huge article in my Applied Metabolics newsletter about the truth about sodium. And what I discovered shocked me. I was shocked myself. It turns out that you could actually get as much as six if you're healthy. If you don't have the sodium, 6 grams a day doesn't do anything bad to you. 6,000 milligrams, that's way more. And the funny thing is, here's the really ironic thing about sodium. If you get too much, it's bad. In other words, if you get, let's say, 12,000 milligrams a day, something like that. But if you get too little, it's just as bad. Both of them will kill you. So 1,500 milligrams. It's not a dangerous amount, but it's veering towards the too low of sodium. And bodybuilders and athletes could get a lot more sodium than they think. Although, if you're training for a contest, you want to get in that ripped shredded. I would still say to be careful about sodium intake because you can't get away from the fact that sodium does retain water. It does. So if you're concerned about that, of course, a lot of the guys take diuretics, which eliminates the problem completely. That's the easy way out. If you take diuretics, you don't have to worry about sodium. And another trick, by the way, and this is if you don't want to take any drugs, is, believe it or not, drinking a lot of water flushes the sodium out of the body. Water is a natural diuretic. People don't know this because it turns off a pituitary hormone called antidiuretic hormone, which causes your body to retain water. The more water you drink, basically, the more water you excrete. See, I have a problem. I drink like a protein drink. I tend after I work out at night, and after I don't drink much water when I'm working out. So when I come home, I take not only the protein drink, but I drink extra water. And I wind up having to go to the bathroom like 10 times a night because of all that water. What's happening is that again, I'm turning off the anti, and it's just going right through me. Any sodium, it's just passing right through me. So that's a little trick. I always tell that to women who have that bloating effect. When they have their menstrual cycle, they get bloated. I tell them increase the water intake. And the funny thing is, the bodybuilders, a lot of them will tell you that they restrict water. 2 days before they restrict water. That's a stupid thing to do, because as soon as you restrict water, the body, the body's very sensitive to the volume of water in the blood. The blood's mostly water. As soon as it goes down a little bit, which can happen by restricting water, your body goes into an emergency situation where it starts to retain water. So that's the worst thing you could do, is to limit water intake before, right, 2 days before. You're going to retain water.
But most bodybuilders have deplete themselves now. That's kind of like
yeah, they deplete themselves, but they also have to remember that muscle tissue, and everybody forgets this little figure. Muscle tissue is 72% water. So if you lose too much water, guess where it's going to come from? It's not going to come from fat. It's going to come from muscle. So you ever see these guys, lad? You see them about 4 days, maybe a week before the contest, and they're shredded. And you look at, well, this guy's going to win. This guy's going to be. And then you see them in the night of the contest, and they don't look quite as cut. They're the vascularity is not there. I'm not saying they're fat, but they don't look ripped anymore. I've seen this over and over all the time. A lot of it has to do with the way they adjusted their water intake, or they might have taken too many diuretics. And if you take too many diuretics, you get an overkill effect where the muscles actually flatten out again. Because remember, the glycogen, which another thing that gives you muscle fullness, each gram of glycogen in the muscle is stored with 2.7 grams of water. If you take too many diuretics, you pull the water out of the glycogen, and you pull the water out of the tissues, so you get too flat a look. It's a fine line. In other words, you want to be really dehydrated on the you do have to be a little dehydrated, but if you go too far, it starts to reverse. And again, you're not going to look fat, but you're going to look flat. That's the term they use, and it's true. I've seen it a million times. Million, yeah.